And welcome to the second and the last plenary session of this year's International Recovery Forum. Please allow me to first welcome all the panelists I have here, but also all the participants who are joining us here in this room, but also virtually. This session will focus on learning from recovery experiences of a few countries, but also getting a bit of reflection around what is the perspective of recovery readiness and building back better. The session that preceded this conversation has already shared quite a lot of examples around learnings from Japan, from 3 decades of events that have taken place, but also putting forward some of the recommendations that the esteemed panel members brought forward from their learnings in the active reaction and post-disaster reconstructions that have been led by the government of Japan and the local governments in itself. Now, before I start the conversation within this panel, and before I introduce my panel members, we need to acknowledge that the last few decades, or at least years, have already started testing our recovery system. When I say our recovery systems, it's not just the international mechanisms, but also the national, the local, and the municipal level systems that have been put in place. With climate change increasing the frequency of events, we are looking at a different paradigm of how events are unfolding and the frequencies of that. So, from locations and countries where they were predominantly affected by a certain type of hazard, they're now getting exposed to multiple events within that same time spectrum to what they were used to. Now, this leads to a bigger question, which, if some of you were here during the last year's IRP Forum, a lot of countries, not just from developed economies, but also from emerging markets and LDCs and small island developing states highlighted that, and there was a very interesting anecdote put forward by one of the national disaster management agencies from the government of Malawi, if I'm not mistaken. He said, we are constantly in a boxing ring. When in the past, there used to be one in a 10-year event that past is now gone. I'm now constantly facing multiple events in a year. So before I get time to recover from one event, I'm facing another event. And it's not giving me enough time, nor to the national ministry or the local governance architecture to recover or even think of building back better. And there is a need to look at recovery from a very different perspective. We need to look at recovery not after an event, but beforehand on what can be done. So from there, what the International Recovery Platform, all the partner agencies that are part of this recovery platform have been trying to figure out is, what do we do differently that could assist member states, both at national level and local level, in addressing recovery beforehand and in time. And that's a process in continuation, that's work in progress. And we're hopeful that sometime very soon, the International Recovery Platform will be able to bring forward what it means by readiness, how do you address readiness, and what should be done differently than what used to be in the past. In various conversations, member states have also highlighted that it's not necessary for us to wait for large-scale events to practice recovery. We need to take also the opportunity of, or the unfortunate occurring of small events to practice recovery. That will allow us to understand what's in place, if it's working, not working, and what needs to be done differently, just in case a larger event happens. There are questions being put forward, such as, is there a difference by having something called early recovery versus long-term recovery? Isn't recovery just one process in itself, invariable of how many different aspects or time scale within it has? Because at the end of the day, and as the previous panel members reflected, invariable of it's called early recovery or long-term recovery, at the end of the day, the intent is still the same, that we want to build back better, we want to be inclusive. We need to take into consideration the various aspects of the society and ensure that what we put in place is not just a mere replacement, but rather building back better, whether it's infrastructure or economy as such. So what we try to do here is, after hearing from the previous panel, we have brought a few of our colleagues from our member states who would be reflecting on their experiences from the events that have happened in their countries, but also colleagues from partner agencies who are assisting the International Recovery Platform in understanding and looking at recovery from a perspective of readiness. I have here today with us, starting from my left, Mr. CABREROS. He is the Director of Rehabilitation and Recovery Management Service of the Office of Civil Defense from the Government of Philippines. I have Mr. HAKIM, who is the Deputy Director for Recovery and Improvement of Public Facilities at the National Disaster Management Agency of Government of Indonesia. I have Mr. PAUDYAL, who is a Project Director for Department of Urban Development and Building Construction from the Ministry of Urban Development of Government of Nepal. And I have Ms. ANAND, who is the Technical Lead for Resilient Recovery at the Asian Disaster Preparedness Center. I must also say that Asian Disaster Preparedness Center is one of our newest members to the International Recovery Platform, so thank you for that. We also had the head of the president of AFAD, Turkey, and representative from the government of Mexico who could not unfortunately make it here today. But it's at least a conversation from a perspective of some of the member states that are here. So we do have roughly another 72 odd minutes, or at least 70 minutes here. I definitely would like to take a few questions from my audience here, but also colleagues and participants who are joining us online. But before that, maybe I'll start by putting a common question to our member states representatives, and Mona, I'll come to you separately with another question. So I think the generic common question would be, you would have seen from your experience of your various departments and ministries, different events, earthquakes, but also hydrometeorological events, if I factor in that into the discussion. So what have been some of the key lessons that has been learned, and where do you see some of the primary challenges? I mean, also, it's not always about challenges. We need to also hear a bit about some of the successes, let's say, in the process. So maybe shall I start with you, Mr. CABREROS? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and good morning to everyone. In the Philippines, we have developed critical insights into achieving resilient disaster recovery through extensive experience as one of the world's most disaster-prone countries. And several key lessons emerge from our national disaster management approach. First is the pre-disaster preparedness, which is implementing comprehensive risk assessments and emergency response protocols before disasters strike. Second is the immediate response priorities, focusing on 3 critical actions within the first 12 to 24 hours, such as prioritizing search and rescue to minimize loss of life, securing surviving communities with food, basic health support, and water, and clearing and restoring critical infrastructure like roads, telecommunications, and utilities. And third, the Philippines has also developed innovative financial strategies to support recovery, such as creating national disaster risk financing and insurance strategies, developing catastrophic risk models, and utilizing contingent financing mechanisms that allow quick emergency relief without diverting long-term development resources. Additionally, a critical aspect of our approach is the post-disaster review process, where response clusters document lessons learned and best practices to continuously improve disaster management policies. Due to the country's geographic and economic vulnerabilities, we continue to face challenges and strive to improve our systems and mechanisms. The country initially struggled with predominantly reactive rather than proactive disaster management approaches, fragmented coordination between government agencies, and insufficient funding for comprehensive risk reduction strategies. The 2019 Cotabato earthquake highlighted various challenges, such as issues in land titling, delineation of responsibilities during rehabilitation and recovery, and underlying need for more established coordination mechanisms for effective project implementation. And as such, we've learned our lessons and we continue to improve our strategies.
Thank you, Mr. CABREROS. I think we'll come back to have some of those follow-up conversations on some of the areas that you have mentioned. But maybe I'll move with the same question to Mr. HAKIM on from Indonesia's perspective. Indonesia has seen one of the largest catastrophes in the last, since the 21st century of itself, right? The Indian Ocean tsunami. It also has seen many other events between then and now. We saw the establishment of BNPB following the event. We saw establishment of many institutional arrangements in Indonesia. But at the same time, there would be still other areas that are being left behind or needs to be addressed. But I think more to hear from you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Panda. Good morning, everyone. So some key takeaways that we believe are essential to achieving resilient recovery. The first one is strong leadership. So a strong leadership combined with the effective coordination among government agencies, international organizations, as well as the local stakeholders is key to accelerating recovery efforts and maintaining, of course, funding commitment. From our experience in Central Sulawesi, 2 presidential instructions were issued as a legal framework to support the process of the recovery. And this is something that can secure all the stakeholder commitments, particularly from ministry and national agencies. The second one is, of course, the stakeholder engagement and inclusivity. We believe that effective recovery begins with identifying and involving key stakeholders early on. This fosters a sense of ownership and ensures that inclusivity of post-disaster rehabilitation reconstruction plan, from planning to implementation, will maximize public participation. Is essential also to achieve equitable and impactful outcomes. And of course, the third one is exploring alternative financing schemes. In our experience now, we are on the stage of establishing another funding mechanism. We call it a disaster pooling fund, which will serve as a financing mechanism to address existing gaps, particularly in rebuilding local government assets. So the last one one is our approach in recovery is to prioritize to build the housing sector. So through the housing repair stimulus assistance to support community housing reconstruction in early recovery phase, early recovery phase is considered one of still in emergency phase, so we use the emergency fund to assist them to build their house. And what the challenges that we encountered, the first one, of course, is financial constraints, still challenges, and also the capacity building at the local level, as well as the monitoring and evaluation of the progress of the recovery. And the last one that we face is the land use and relocation challenges that also a problem that we met during the recovery process. I think that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. HAKIM. I think there was a common point. From the Philippines perspective, it was land use you mentioned. There are efforts around financial mechanism. Mr. HAKIM, you also mentioned about land titling, the issue around relocation, but also financially, there is a gap that needs to be looked at. Maybe I'll move to you, Mr. PAUDYAL, around from Nepal's experience. You have seen one of the largest earthquakes that received global solidarity equally in post-reconstruction processes. What's still out there that needs to be addressed?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It is my great pleasure to be here to speak about the Nepal recovery efforts, experiences after 2015 Gorkha in Nepal. So let you, inform about the Nepal earthquake. It's on 25th of April 2015, 7.8 magnitude earthquake struck Nepal and killed around 9,000 people. And we lost more than around 800,000 houses as well. So we lost around 6.6 billion, the US dollar. It comes around the 33% of the Nepalese GDP. So I was involved from the beginning of this recovery process. So there were so many, the lessons that we have learned since, from the beginning of our recovery process. So I would like to highlight the three key lessons that we learned. The first one is the coordination. Actually, after the mega disaster, like 2015 Gorkha earthquake, the different actors we have coordinated. So we work with the different international agencies, development partners, civil societies, intergovernmental agencies, communities. It's a really, the challenge to coordinate with each other. And coordination is a key, to start or to, the recover in a well process. So the effective coordination is the key for achieving the resilient recovery. So that is the one lessons, that we have learned. And second lessons is around the standard operating procedures. We need to develop the different kind of policies, guidelines, operating procedures, for the recovery process. So this need to be done in early stage, and this need to be done in the harmonized, the way. So the government needs to approve, and then every actor needs to follow the same kind of, the procedures. Then it will make the resilient recovery. So standard operating procedures, guidelines, and the technical standards, these are the key, for the resilient recovery. So these are the lessons. The second lessons is the main important lesson that we have learned for resilient recovery. Third one is actually the resource management. We got many, the resources, even the financial assistance or technical assistance or material assistance. It's a management is the key. So where are the victims? Where are the needy areas? So we need to classify for that. And the management of the resources is another important when we start or when we do the recovery process. So these are actually the recovery process is the humanitarian supports. We need to, we need to be very sensitive. And, the quick response is another, the kind of thing that we need to, do. So these three areas that we, learned a lot and wants to carry on for the future, there may be a chances of big earthquake next yes, in Nepal as well. So, the challenges, the main challenge is to reach out properly to the affected people. Actually, the vulnerable people. How to reach out, how to, handle them first. That is the main challenges for us, actually. And because those people, do not have the proper education, they do not have a proper access channel to the higher authorities. So to reach out those vulnerable or, the people and groups is a bigger challenge that we faced. And of course, the other challenges may be the support material and the supply, maintaining the supply chain. Yes, and also the proper communication channel to set up from the central government to the community levels. So the recovery does not mean the one-way communication, from central government to the community and community voices to the government. So we need to address in between the recovery process. So these are these challenges that we faced, and also some special kind of instrument or tools, applications, either could be through the through the internet or through the different apps. So these are the the key for the recovery process. Other is the technical, of course. We know that we rely with the owner-driven approach, community-driven approach. So So technical capacity is very, very poor in the community level. So we face the challenge how to go with Build Back Better to the community levels. So the technical challenges, these are we faced, and then try to implement in the community level. So these are the few challenges that we face. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that. I'll go to Mona now, but I'll give a bit of background before I put forward the question to you. And then maybe we'll come back to our colleagues from the countries, because you laid out some of the challenges that you see based on the experience, but also maybe we would like to hear from you what has been, if there are any success stories that we could potentially enhance or take it from there, from your experiences also, from the recent past per se. But Mona, ADPC definitely is, it's been around for quite some time. It works very closely with the member states in the region. There's a vast amount of expertise and experience that ADPC has. ADPC is also assisting the International Recovery Platform currently in developing something what's called the Readiness Recovery Framework or the assessment process. But before we go in putting it out there, ADPC is talking to or looking at multiple cases across the globe on what are some of the experiences of countries that, or what are some of the common challenges across multiple countries. Maybe could you bring forward what's coming out from that analysis of case studies of countries? Are there any common threads that you have come across? That okay, these are the 3 or 4 common issues that's visible from those analyses.
Thank you, Abhilash, and I'm very pleased to be sharing with you some of our learnings, from the vast portfolio that ADPC already has, and of course, this new project where we are assisting the IRP and the UNDRR, along with our partners, CUDRR, where we are looking at, what does readiness for recovery look like? And how do you track it? Because it's not a one-time thing. So in that process, like you pointed out, we have done a desk research of about 16. It's actually not about, it's precisely 16 countries that we've looked at across the globe. I want to take the liberty of sharing one reflection before I come to the challenges. And this, I think, is fundamental to the whole, discourse around readiness now. So, asset losses that we see after disasters, houses, bridges, power supply, telecom, etc., those are things that are lost, and then they won't degrade further over time. But then the social side of things, the social well-being of disaster-affected people, if it is not addressed in a timely manner through recovery efforts, then it only worsens. So in the literature, we found this whole concept, especially driven by the World Bank, which is around well-being losses. So we're not only looking at asset losses, we are also looking at well-being losses. And readiness for recovery with a lens of Build Back Better or a perspective of Build Back Better basically has 3 touch points. So building back stronger and more robust or resilient, building back in a timely manner. I won't say rushing it at the expense of quality, but timeliness is critical. And third is inclusion. People who are already on the fringes of our society, when they get impacted by disasters, they only go deeper into the poverty trap, and sometimes to get them back out is very difficult. So timeliness and focus on those marginalized groups within our society is very, very important. So this is one fundamental reflection that the literature threw at us, which actually, made us even more convinced and more committed to driving and working with you and the IRP on the readiness agenda. So that's that. Now, of course, the challenges that our colleagues from the countries have shared, they are very real. We see them across the countries. I won't repeat them, they are there, but I want to bring to your attention 3 more things in terms of challenges One, when we're talking of coordination, we have to perhaps take it a step forward by saying, what does the future look like? Are we ready to coordinate in a future scenario? For example, if you look at the case of Tonga, we saw the volcanic eruption happen, which also triggered a tsunami, right? Or it was related to that. Now, they were prepared to coordinate more, for want of a better word, a simpler situation. Now, a more complicated situation that has actually impacted more than 80% of the population, you can't. So coordination also has to have a different ambition to it, which is around being future-focused and future-ready. That is one. So just another example I want to give you before I move on, which is around tabletop exercises. We say that, it's a very good modality to help people understand how coordination would pan out. Tabletop exercises are done in some countries as per our research, but then those tabletop exercises very often do not match up with the real scenario. And then again, you're running helter-skelter, trying to make sense of that chaotic situation. The second point is around the whole idea of capacities. A colleague from Nepal shared that, capacities are lacking. We talk of owner-driven reconstruction. Now, are we taking it to a different level of nuance when we are looking at women-headed households? How would a single woman engage in an owner-driven process? What are the cultural norms around engagement or participation of women in more conservative societies that we have in different countries, right? What are the cultural norms around, let us say, the engagement of fisher folk in doing reconstruction with their own hands? Is that possible? So, my request is purely in terms of challenges for us to go forward and look at the deeper nuances of these desirables that we want to see on the ground and the real challenges associated with that. And my third point is around fund mobilization and utilization. We heard from the colleagues that, funding is a problem. First of all, estimating. Based on PDNAs, we do not have baseline data available to sort of see what is the quantum of fund requirement. And then mobilizing that. In most cases in our study, we have seen that, although some countries did have mechanisms of, leveraging existing partnerships, let us say with the ADB or the World Bank, for funding their reconstruction work, in most cases that's not there. Even if that's there, utilization in a systematic and transparent manner and the ability to report back within their country and to people supporting with that funding in a timely manner, how the money was used, those mechanisms are missing. And a lot of it can be done ahead of time in what we call the readiness perspective. I'll pause there. Thank you.
Thanks, Mona. That was very helpful. And we'll come back to hear more from you on the initial, what you may call the framework or the design of this readiness instrument. But maybe before I go back to our colleagues from the member states on hearing if there is any success story that responds to some of these challenges. It does not need to be exactly to your challenges, but let's say a challenge that Nepal is encountering. Is there a success story at your end that could assist Nepal in, or vice versa? I just want to summarize what you all said. Land use, land titling, this seems like a common issue across countries. Financial management, which is availability of financing for reconstruction or post-disaster recovery, or accessibility to the right amount of financing seems to like a common thread of issue. Coordination, the issue with coordination always is adequate coordination versus effective coordination. That looks like a common thread of an issue. Existence of governance instruments, whether it's the standard operating procedures or likes of those, could be an issue or maybe not, depending on how things are set up. Nepal, Mr. PAUDYAL put up something interesting, which we don't hear very often, is supply chain. Existence of a supply chain instrument or the readiness of a supply chain to react to things. I don't know if that's something common across multiple countries in itself. Housing was mentioned by almost all of you, but then it goes into the financial part of things. It goes to the inclusive nature of rebuilding, reconstruction, but also it goes into the apparatus of coordination, because in post-tsunami, some of us who were involved in the post-tsunami reconstruction, one of the world's largest post-disaster response, there were situations where we have encountered that housing was done at such a fast speed that it did not meet the cultural requirements of that family household. That never got used by those families. That raises other questions. Do we understand what are the needs versus how we are going to reconstruct, rebuild? I'm going to pause here. I may have missed something, and that's my mistake. But I'll give the floor to, and there is no specific order, but if there's some success stories you want to reflect, because it's not always about challenges. There are good things happening, and we cannot discount those. And that could help others in understanding of that. Would you like to start, Mr. CABREROS?
Okay, thank you again. Let me start by citing our approach in disaster risk reduction, wherein we appreciate our Congress for enacting a law by strengthening our Philippine disaster risk reduction and management programs. And through this, we have developed our framework, of course, with the help of other organizations, and we were able to come up with the following, the 4 pillars of the RRM, starting with the prevention and mitigation pillar, then preparedness pillar, response pillar, and rehabilitation and recovery pillar. And may I just cite that with the recent calamities that we encountered, we were able to, with the support of other agencies, we were able to come up with anticipatory actions on these matters. And one particular example of our success is the aftermath of the 2019 Cotabato earthquake, where we were able to come up with a comprehensive plan in the rehabilitation of the affected areas. And our Congress immediately allotted a financing to address the rehabilitation concerns. So with that, we were able to provide housing, reconstruct the facilities, and even the water system of the affected areas. And so this is a good example for us in terms of addressing the effects of earthquake. But then again, recently we were, as mentioned by Ms. Mona, that we were adapting what we call now the Ready to Rebuild framework, and with the help of the World Bank. And with this, we are benchmarking and putting up some pre-disaster activities by benchmarking the hazard areas. And likewise, we intend to already set up our, in coordination, of course, with the different stakeholders, particularly the local government units, that we need to determine what are the actions to be taken in case of any disasters. So these are the progress of our in addressing disasters.
No, thank you, thank you very much. Because we did have a conversation separately within the IRP. Does anticipatory action and its financing, is that an instrument to reduce the impact of events, reduce the impact on a post-disaster situation? And what you just mentioned is somehow trying to answer that yes, it does to a larger extent. But I think the global discourse around anticipatory action always has been, how do you scale it up? Because it still remains largely confined to certain type of actions or as pilots. But maybe that's something that you could reflect on. What has been your experience around anticipatory action and the financing around it?
With regards to the financing and addressing some concerns on the ground, our government have already allocated funds for the National Disaster Risk Reduction programs. And likewise, it is mandated upon the law that the local government should allot 5% of their internal revenue allocations, so they can already address some minor concerns on their communities. But for a larger scale, the national government will come in and provide assistance.
Thank you very much for the additional response. Mr. Hakim, your reflections on some of the common challenges and if there is any good practice that Indonesia has had in place that could assist in addressing?
Yeah, Mr. Pan, thank you. So we think that collaboration has been another cornerstone of our recovery efforts. In Central Sulawesi after 2018 earthquake and tsunamis, we brought together government agencies, international organizations, private sectors, and local communities. By working together, we optimize resources and minimize duplication effort. For example, we have AHA Center through the coordinating all member states of the ASEAN to do the intervention of the build 100 houses. They call it Kampung ASEAN Village. So this is something that we think that it is a success. We can bring all the ASEAN member states to intervene the recovery process because mostly they do it only at the emergency phase. So this is something new, and we think that this is something can be improved in the future. Other things, the utilizing of technology. We have a GIS application to help us to do the PDNA. This approach ensures the collection of accurate data based on location and damage criteria, and also enabling a more targeted, efficient recovery process. The last one is we have in Indonesia, we ensure that recovery planning is a comprehensive and inclusive, engaging all relevant stakeholders. Rehabilitation reconstruction plans are formalized by the local government through official regulation. This will ensure their status as legally binding documents. So these plans are designed to establish clear priorities, realistic timelines, and effective funding mechanism. The structured approach keeps us focused and allows us to measure progress effectively, ensuring sustainable and coordinated recovery process. So that's the key three things that we did for the recovery in Indonesia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hakim. So PAUDYAL, your reflections on the challenges, but more now to respond as what are some of the successes or good practices that could assist in addressing some of the common challenges?
In our case, yeah.
Could be in your case, it could be reflecting on.
Thank you so much. Actually, in fact, before the earthquake, we didn't have set up any kind of, the approaches for the recovery because all the recovery process start from scratch, so we set up the institutions and then we developed the different, the modalities. So, and of course, there were so many modalities were discussed and approaches were discussed and try to implement, but after a few months, because the people were confused and sometimes irritated, if we go for the different approaches, modalities. So we applied the one-door policy, one-door system, that means the central government and from the National Reconstruction Authorities, we developed the one standard operating procedures and then, apply for everyone, every system, every, the development partners and even NGOs and other people as well. So, but to my experience, and also from our experience as well, as I talked before, the community-driven approach is the key, for our success, for the housing reconstruction in Nepal. So because, mostly rural areas were affected, and mostly hilly areas were affected from 2015 earthquakes. So in the community-driven approach, the community or people, the house owner, they need to build their houses by themselves. So, and for that, we apply the one CMB, Community Mobilization Program. community mobilized program, play a very important role. This combines the government support and the community support, both. The government is has a strength of the technicalities, technical expertise, and also finance. A community has the strength on their, working together moralities. So we apply that, the two and blend each other, and they have their indigenous knowledge. They have that practical knowledge of doing the things their own way. And government and the development partner, we have some scientific knowledge. So we try to blend together and then generate some new practical knowledge as well. So this gives the term community mobilization program, in which we apply the lead masons, and we can understand the technicalities and understand the drawings, and also the voices of the local masons as well, local communities as well. And these lead masons are trained by the engineers. So lead mason train to the community masons, and the lead mason, the engineer train to the lead mason. So, we involve the social mobilizer as well. So community-wise, we make the group of the people, technical, social mobilizer, and community people. And they are working together in the community level. Then working together modalities, that means the synergy of the public support and the mutual support that we develop. And then this success story of the Housing Reconstruction Nepal is because of the CMP, the Community Mobilization Program. That helps out for us. Even myself, one of the authors, we published in international journal, about this CMP model. How, the international disaster, the risk reduction journal. So we published this. That could be can be the success story can be applied, replicated to other part of the world as well. So that's I wanted to share at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Can I maybe bother you with a follow-up question on that? So you mentioned about the building capacity of masons, and then engaging them with the local contractors, and in the housing rebuilding reconstruction process, I believe. But this would be post the earthquake in the event of that. How have you managed to retain that capacity? Like, because the reconstruction program after a few years won't be anymore as a reconstruction program, right? How has Nepal managed to retain that kind of capacity? Do you still do training of masons and the construction market, the real estate around it?
Yeah, actually the mason training is the government continues the program as well. Not in that much, in the limited the things. So, but in owner-driven approach, we had at that time around 100,000 the masons we need at that time. So we took a support from the different partners and at that time, and also from the government initiatives, we did that. But retaining is a very difficult task, because once they get such kind of certification system, we applied it, and we make some the registration mechanism as well. However, they at the moment even for this 2023, we experienced one earthquake, in the western part as well, and then we try to apply that the mason to those areas, but not much work. Not much work, because the masons need to produce in the local level, the local where the affected, where the houses were affected. So that is the key. They are the key. They can carry on to reconstruct community houses in future as well. Right. So retaining policy is very difficult and challenging for us. However, if we develop the mason in the local level, they can be the very important assets for the community for their future construction or in new houses or some maintenance of the houses. At least they know about it. What are the earthquake resilient features? What are the things that need to be taken care, for the construction of the houses. So we go, not only for the reconstruction, making the community resilient. So that is our, the main motto. What I,
Thank you for that response. So maybe so there is a second part to this conversation, which is around what is readiness and how do you look at readiness from your operations perspective? And for you to respond to that, I'll ask Mona to talk a bit about what is coming out from the initial analysis and the work that ADPC and Columbia University is doing for IRP. But maybe before that, because there are a few interesting questions that has come from some of our participants who are maybe here in the room or joining us virtually, which are predominantly towards our colleagues from member states. So I wanted to take those so that you can reflect to it. But before that, I wanted to see if there are any questions from the floor here in the room, any queries you have to what the colleagues from Philippines, Indonesia, and Nepal talked about their experiences before I go on the questions that I have here on the monitor. If not, maybe I'll give you a few more seconds to think about it. So maybe I'll take a question, or one or two from here. So there was a question which I cannot see anymore. Yeah, here, sorry. So there's a question which where it says, what is the biggest challenge when collecting loss and damage data after large-scale disasters? Because you must have dealt with this frequently. But maybe I'll tweak it a bit here for you. What is the biggest challenge when collecting loss and damage data after any disaster? Anybody would like to take it?
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
I think I have already have an answer to that. Our biggest challenge there is the absence of the available data on the ground, particularly, as I mentioned, is the baseline data. Right now, we are still developing through our Plan Smart to come up with the baseline data of all communities, particularly in the hazard-prone areas. And we are still capacitating our local government to come up with their local DRRM plans, indicating therein those data. And hopefully, if we could have those data, we could readily get the come up with the loss and damages data also after a disaster.
All right. Thank you. Any other reflections from maybe?
I think in our experience, capacity is one of the challenge that we made, because when we do the PDNA, different backgrounds will be for the doing that PDNA can be result a different perspective. If, for instance, if you want to do the verification for damaged house, everyone will have a different perspective for how damaged the house is, for example. So if the capacity is not built, is not put in place or trained before, it will be a problem in doing so it will extend also the time of doing the PDNA.
Understood. In case of Indonesia, there is kind of a baseline data, right? There is...
Yes, we have, but I think we still not utilize it, the whole aspect of that data. So that we plan to do it. Starting for this year, we plan to do the pre-disaster recovery plan. So we set up the guidelines now, and by the end of the year, we have that already finalized, so we can distribute to the local government.
Thank you. Mr. PAUDYAL, do you have a reflection on loss and damage data?
Yeah, actually, PDNA, the post-disaster assessment it tells about in general, the calculation of how much, the losses that has occurred. But if you really want to go for the reconstruction or recovery process, we need a little bit deeper in the data. The classify the buildings, what kind of damage it has. So the major problem that we have is, the Philippines, mentioned about the baseline data, the existing data in the local government, and the technical capacities, to handle those kind of assessment. That's why, from our side, the technical capacity we generally develop by training to the universities, the technical students, even, for the housing, the recovery process. But for the important building like schools and hospitals, we develop the SIDA, structural integrated and damage assessment. It's a deeper, than the general assessment of the building. So that classify the what kind of damage it has. Whether it needs retrofitting, whether it can need for demolition, or whether it just for the maintenance. So in my, the sense, the technical capacity is the major, for damage assessment. So, because based on those assessment, we can develop the recovery plan and the investment plan and the priority investment plan. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you for that. Simona, maybe we go off to you just to hear from you what's coming out from the initial analysis around what defines readiness, because is readiness equal to pre-disaster planning, but also what is the framework looking like? And maybe because that will allow us then to get a bit of reflection also from our colleagues on how do they see readiness at their end.
Sure, thanks Abhilash. So pre-disaster planning and much more. And I'll just give you an overview of what's emerging. So basically, when we are looking at readiness for recovery, we are looking at what are those actions that can be and should be done ahead of a disaster in readiness of a recovery phase where we want to build back stronger, we want to build back in a timely manner, and we want to build back in a manner that inclusion is promoted and people are at the center of the entire recovery process. So if that be the goal of what we are trying to do, there are broadly 4 what we are calling readiness domains that are emerging for us, and I'll tell about those in a minute. But before that, and this also builds on what we just heard from our colleagues from member states, there are some foundational elements that are necessary for us to undertake readiness. And those foundational elements are what we are calling enablers at this moment. They are as follows. The first is leadership. We heard that from the 3 countries on this panel. Leadership at the highest level of authority to make sure that everyone, like we say, all the ducks are in a row, really. Everyone does what they're supposed to do because there is an expectation from the leadership at the highest level for things to roll out in a certain manner. The second one is awareness. All stakeholders to be aware that recovery is a process where everyone has to come with their best foot forward, including communities, because that will require some shifts in the way people are using their land. People might have to give up their land for the larger good, etc. So awareness is important. That's the second enabler. And the third enabler is more of a mechanism, which is around continued enhancement of readiness. It's like insurance. If I don't renew it today and it lapses, I'm not covered the next time around. So that is really foundational. Now, in terms of the 4 domains that are emerging, it's a no-brainer, but the devil lies in the detail. The 4 domains are as follows. The first one is around governance. The second is around finance. The third one is around capacities, and we've heard all of this this morning. And the fourth one is around knowledge and data. How do we use existing data and knowledge and build upon that to do recovery in a manner that we want? Now, within governance, I want to draw your attention to a couple of things that are really coming out very strongly for us. there's a component around vision and strategy. So at the highest level, what is the vision of recovery that we are promoting? Are we promoting inclusion there? Are we promoting sectors to come together? You know, how do you bring, let us say, housing reconstruction and livelihoods together? How do you make sure that, you know, these sectors are coming together and speaking to each other even before a disaster, so that when it comes to recovery planning, that's not the first time they're talking to each other. So that's that, you know, multi-sector, multi-hazard, and highest level of political commitment to things like inclusion and JESI, they are there. The second part within the governance pillar is around who is going to do all this? What is the mechanism that we have in place for taking forward recovery? So a governance structure, including national, subnational, local bodies, with a clear definition of role, mandate, and authority across all stages of recovery. Service continuity plan for this governance structure. God forbid, if there's a massive disaster, this structure may itself be affected, not only in terms of infrastructure, but also people who are making this structure work. Then platforms for administrative coordination, real platforms where people will come together and sectors will speak to each other. Departments will speak to each other for joint planning, etc., etc. And then platforms for involvement of various other stakeholders, such as communities, private sector, etc. Basically, the idea is to ensure accountability and set up mechanisms for grievance redressal. Then within this piece, if we go deeper, we also have policies and plans. We heard about SOPs just now from Nepal. It's so important to have these policies well thought out ahead of time, because let us say there is a need to use common property or use private property for public good. What is the policy that guides these processes? Then criteria and guidance for making decisions on what will be retrofitted and what needs to be repaired and what needs to be rebuilt completely. All of these things can be decided ahead of a disaster, and then it's a case of just taking them forward. Then policy guidelines for timely revision of building codes and standards of practice. Because when, you know, it's, what's that phrase? When it rains, you can't be building your roof then. So when I have to rebuild in the aftermath of a disaster, I cannot look at my risk data and say, hey, this is how my design code needs to change, right? So these things, we already have the risk data available to us in many cases. The climate data is evident, available to us. We need to revise and update our building codes and standards of practice. Then policies for transparent and timely procurement of goods and services for recovery initiatives. In fact, this is very important, because how do you regulate prices? The market demand is much higher, the supply will be low, price will go up definitely. So a governance structure is so important to get these things right from the get-go. Within this piece, we also have this whole thing around plans, and I'll just flag 3 important things to you. Standing agreements with private sector entities for recovery services such as material supply chains, including pre-negotiated rates and activation protocols and plans. This should be a part of our plan. Contingency plans for critical infrastructure and services, including facility restoration, supply chain restoration, and personnel deployment. These things have to be a part of the plan, otherwise we are just, you know, on a wild goose chase during a disaster. And then, of course, plan for recovery and enhancement of ecological assets, which is so fundamental to, you know, to our existence on this planet. Of course, there are other things like, you know, review of recovery for readiness actions, update of strategies, monitoring of data, monitoring and data collection systems, etc. Within this piece, within the governance pillar, the last piece is around post-disaster assessments. And a lot of our research is showing that capacities for undertaking post-disaster assessments don't exist. So after a disaster, we are having to do rapid trainings of personnel from different sectors to come and participate in the needs assessment process. I'll move to the second pillar, which is around finance, and there are essentially 3 things there. What is the financing strategy in country and leveraging from outside sources? What are the instruments for utilizing the money that's available, whether it is in country and outside? So, and also what are the instruments that are available before a disaster, ex ante and ex post instruments? And what kind of innovative instruments are available? That's the second piece. And then how do you manage all of this money? I mean, imagine getting what, $19 million in a small country like Fiji. The requirement was 38 million. They finally got, after Cyclone Winston, they managed 19. Even managing that, 50% of what was required, such a tall order. So those management systems can be put in place ahead of time. So this is the second pillar around finance. The third pillar around capacities is, again, it's so straightforward. I don't know why we don't do it already. First one is around making sure we have the institutional and organizational capacities for recovery. Where are the people? Where is the mandate? What is the role? And how do we make sure those systems are in place within organizations to undertake recovery? And of course, tabletop exercises, like I mentioned earlier, are important things to get these things embedded in the way we work. The second is around skills and competencies. We heard about the skills of construction workers. How do you build them ahead of time? And I totally empathize with your concern that we build those skills and competencies and then there is no demand, and then those skills, they just sort of erode or rust away. Can they be embedded in our mainstream construction practices as a matter of routine habit or as a matter of practice per se? So that is the second piece around skills and competencies within the capacity pillar. And the third one is around tools. We want to do our job better. We want to do it faster. Where are the tools? Where are the tools for doing a quick disaster need assessment, digitally enabled? Where are the tools for, let us say, housing typologies for different, agro-climatic zones of different countries? So these are the tools that are the last part of the capacity pillar. The final one is around data updation and data preparedness and knowledge. Three things there. First is around risk information and updated risk information, including population tracking systems. A lot of what climate change is throwing at us, people are having to move out of where they were living. How do you track these people and help them recover? So risk information, which is more holistic, going beyond pure, the HVCA approach that we take. The second is around resilience assessments. We know what can we bank upon, including safe failure, right? How do we plan for safe failure so that fundamental, the critical services keep working for us and we can bank on them to build up recovery. And finally, knowledge management systems. How do we build back the lessons from earlier recovery experiences into the future recovery work so that we are not making the same mistake again? And also, how do we leverage traditional knowledge that's available, the wisdom that's available within the local area to do better recovery that's inclusive and robust? So this is broadly what it looks like. Of course, there are cross-cutting issues within this around inclusion, around environmental sustainability. These are the things that, innovation, for example, we really need to up the game, so to speak. The pace at which disasters are hitting us, like you were saying, Abhilash, in the beginning, we are all in a boxing ring. So we need to step our game up through innovative tools and methodologies. I think this is broadly what it looks like. And of course, we'll request your input, your support, your advice on sharpening this, making it more useful for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mona. Very comprehensive. I want to use what you just to share to get feedback from our colleagues from the three countries, but I'm going to also open the floor to everyone in the room because you have had experiences like the previous panel members with multiple events that have been responded to and rebuilding has happened around it. But before that, I'll just quickly summarize how you structured it. So what the analysis is suggesting is if you have to look at readiness for resilient recovery, the outcome or the definition of that would be a recovery that looks at building resilience, it's timely and inclusive. The enablers for that are leadership and awareness. And the priority domains or the pillars for that would be governance, financial management, capacity, and data, tools, and knowledge. And then you elaborated some of the details of those. So here is a question. Maybe if I can come back to my panel members, but as I said, I'm keeping the floor open if our colleagues in the room would have reactions also to it. So maybe there are two questions. One is, what's your initial reaction to this, what Mona just explained around readiness for resilient recovery? And B, if, again, based on your experience, are there one or two, you want to call it a key performance measurement indicator or a domain or something specific that you see that could have been in place in the case of your country that could have helped in being prepared or ready for a recovery?
For the Philippines, I think, as explained by Ms. Mona, it's really these domains and the enablers are very important, particularly on the governance, awareness, and these mechanisms. And in the Philippines, we have established this, although we have some concerns on the governance, wherein we need to really strengthen our coordination and the implementation of all the measures to either to prevent and mitigate the effects of the disasters and, of course, the strengthening of our recovery efforts. So I believe it was explained explicitly by Ms. Mona, and we conform to that also.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, thank you. So what have been explained by Mona is very comprehensive, and we think Indonesia will adopt all the things, especially to put it in our pre-disaster recovery plan. So maybe we will contact you to get advice on it, and I think that's it.
Yeah, Monaji, really the comprehensive, the statement given for this readiness, the three pillars of the readiness as well. For me, from the Nepalese perspective, the related with the readiness, sometimes we talk much on with the resiliency of the community as well. So when we go for the readiness, rather, the preparedness from the central government, or rather preparedness with some expertise, let us think how much the community is readiness in the rural areas. We know that they have their own system of tackling with the disaster. Mm-hmm. They have their own system, indigenous knowledge, tackling with the small kind of disaster. We cannot say for the bigger disaster they can tackle, but how we can capacitate to them, how we can upgrade their knowledge, based on our R&D, research and development, that we need to think from the international communities as well. Not only, the inbuilding or forcing to adopt some system from the developed things to the new areas or the rural communities, and we try to implement for the readiness. But how we can capacitate to them by, the learning from them, and then, the blending our knowledge and their knowledge, and then generating some new thing for them as well, so that they can, adapt, and also that need to be work on that part as well. Just I want to add, those points. Thank you.
No, very helpful. Thank you. Any reflections from the floor here? I'm sure that there is something missing, but what is it? Because if it's already correct, that means we knew what should have been there from the outset. I'm happy to take if there are any suggestions on making the instrument better than what we are currently proposing. Maybe Mona, while there is, we're waiting for any reflection from the floor, there is a question from the online audience. What is the main difference in recovery needs and readiness needs that you are seeing from the analysis that's coming up? Is there a difference between recovery needs and readiness needs?
I'm trying to understand the question better, but from
or maybe it's more recovery needs and resilience needs. Is there a difference between, in general?
I think so. And if I take the three phrases, they're all different, closely related, but different. So in my understanding, very humble understanding, I'd say recovery need is a real need. You know, something has happened, something is lost or damaged, it needs to be repaired or rebuilt. That is a recovery need. We can be more ambitious with that recovery need if we take a build back better perspective. That's that, and that's where I want to bring in the resilience need. And I would say resilience need takes us a step forward in the sense that it allows us to plan for failure also. It allows us to look at what kind of redundancy measures do we need to keep the system going. To give you an example, you know, if there is a telecom network, how do and that has got damaged or destroyed because of a disaster, how do I rebuild so that, you know, I have extreme safety built in some parts of the system that will help the whole system work when there is another disaster. So I plan for failure in the future in that sense. So that's resilience need. And readiness need is basically doing what I can do in preparation for all of this to happen in the future. I don't know whether that makes sense. But yes, these are closely related, but they are different in my view.
Thank you for that additional response. I am very grateful for allowing me to go off script a bit and put you a bit on the spot to everyone. Very grateful for that. Please allow me to now thank all of my panel members here, but everybody in the audience for being patient, listening to them. This is, as I said, work in progress. We are hoping to have the International Recovery Platform continue this consultation with other member states, with other stakeholders and partners before the readiness assessment instrument goes live for member states to use it. The intention here is to build on what's already there, learn from experiences of countries, both those ones that have challenged the member states, but where there has also been successes that could be potentially replicated. So your input to this conversation was very valuable, and please let me thank you again for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.